fact, 81% users and 87% of non-metro users and consumers of video content today are
Right now,
on
we
mobile.
had a swap. The first session was taken by Skulk, right? Which came here.
This is
Now we
an
have
IDC
Parimala.
report according to
So Parimala will
in
have to be
2014.
felicitated by you. You will have to give her the
The
certificate.
trends have changed much
call you on
stage
stage.
Okay, and that's
higher.
now.
In general,
no, not exactly right now,
in
after this.
2008, the number of
Exactly
the
about
percentage of
12,
Yeah.
internet users on mobile was just 1%, and the rest was on desktop or laptops. And in 2012, according to IDC, the percentage of internet users on mobile had risen to about 58%. In 2014, I'm sure it's much higher. Year over year, there has been a 1.5x increase in the number of users who are accessing internet on mobile devices. And we all know about social media. The percentage of users who are on mobile and who are using social media is also increasing. Predominantly, products or companies like Facebook, Snapchat, and a bunch of others have almost replaced desktops with mobile devices. So there are a major number of users who have been moving to mobile, and these days we have 2-3 phones per user. As we speak, if X is the population of the world, 2X is the number of mobile devices that the world currently has. And here is where we are heading. So where are we in terms of testing for mobile devices? Let's take an example of any app that you're using. So what are the different aspects of testing that you can think about for mobile devices? Can anyone just speak out? If you are going to install a brand new app on your mobile device, what is the first thing that you're going to do? Usability, okay. Speed, okay. Performance. Reviews before you install the app most of the times.
Does it launch when you install it?
Perfect. Serving the purpose. So some of these answers are pretty much covered what I'm going to cover in detail today. So there are 7 pillars of mobile apps test strategy that I'm going to talk about today. The first of in it is the app exploration, or how you explore. Agile philosophies is one of the philosophies which, according to me, I believe is the only philosophies which emphasizes the need for learning even before you start developing or testing or doing whatsoever. That's also why Agile is very close to my heart. Exploration of the product. Let's say as users, even though you are users, you mentioned about usability, speed, networks, and a whole bunch of other things. As a tester, what do you do to explore the app? Initially, when you start installing or downloading the app, testing starts right there. You start exploring, what is this app about? What is the name? What is its logo? What is the history behind the app? What is the legacy behind this app? For example, if you read the book Hatching Twitter, the way Twitter was in 2006 is nowhere close to what it is today. Okay? So what is the evolution? If you are one of the testers on the Twitter testing team, then what would your approach be to testing? And how well knowing the legacy of Twitter product itself will help you become a better tester? Very, very key things to know for legacy products especially. What are the different types of apps? We have native, hybrid, web, and then we have different platforms, which I'll cover in the subsequent slide. One of them mentioned about the purpose. What is the purpose that this is going to solve? Every app or every product is born into this world to serve a specific purpose. There is an unmet need that someone saw and they wanted to meet that need, and that's why we build products, and that's why users buy products. Is the product really serving the purpose? It's very, very important when you pick up a product for testing, what is the purpose that it's serving? Physical features on the phone, something that most of us don't count as part of testing on mobile apps. So your iPhone looks a little different with the, with just a glass screen that you can use. Your Android phones are going to have a few control buttons with volume controls on the sides. There are dual cameras these days, one on the top, one on the bottom for LG phones. So these are the physical aspects of the phone. When developers are developing the apps, they are least worried about the physical features of the phone. It's it's very, very important that we ask questions around how will this app look on a Samsung phone, or how will this app look on a so-and-so Motorola phone, which is so very different from Nokia phones. Of course, Nokia phones are dead now. So the physical aspects of the phones and how your app is going to coincide or sit on the phone and how the users are going to use it is very, very important. This is one of the aspects only very few mobile evangelists like Jonathan Cole have emphasized on. He's written a book called Tap into Mobile Application Testing, a brilliant book. If you're interested, you can go ahead and read it. Testing tours. So majority of us, we already know testing tours. This is a term that was introduced by Michael D. Kelly about 6-7 years ago. So according to testing tours, you can actually take a separate tour. For example, let's say you have to tour Bangalore. Many of you might be out of Bangalore in this audience today. You can tour from this hotel to a specific place in n number of ways. Let's say it's Vidhana Saudha. So the way you might take Cunningham Road, you can take HMT Road, or a different landmark, go by Coffee House, which is another landmark in itself, and so on. These are different ways in which you can tour to different points in the city. Similarly, you can tour the products as well in terms of menu tours, installation tour, how your installation process goes through, tabs tour, compatibility tour, usability tour, and so on. So there are different tours, and in most of the cases, our mobile application testing stops there. We are done with testing and then we are ready to ship. That's not all. So what are the other heuristics we should be using when it comes to mobile apps testing? There are several in the market. Again, Jonathan Cole has written a very great book. I've handpicked a few. One person, a friend of mine called Dhanashekhar Subramaniam, has come up with two frameworks called Cop Flung Gun and Long Fun Cup. Some of you might know it. So this is a very, very basic UI heuristic coverage model which will help you test for different aspects of the mobile device. If you have to take the mobile device and test it, then let's say there is an app here. I don't know whose phone it is. So you have an app here, then what are the different aspects you will be able to test for the app? One, go through the app, test the app, and then figure out what it does, how it works, and so on. What about elements? For example, location. If your app is geo-aware, how does it behave inside this conference room or in the restroom when you just went there to browse through some messages or make a call? What about orientation? Angry Birds doesn't give a landscape orientation, and the portrait orientation. So are you happy or unhappy? You're most of the times on your bed rolling around and using your device, and you're mostly irritated about how the orientation happens. So should the apps really support orientation or not? What kind of apps should have orientation? What should not? The next aspect is gestures. So in some phones you pinch and swipe, in some phones you just slide over, in some you're just moving around, shake it. Snapdeal has a feature where you shake it and you get all the offers around, but it just vanishes in a minute. So what is the time for which the offer should be visible to the user, or it should disappear? Those are part of the gestures. The next one is the network. What are the network speeds? We are still in 2G, while many countries are in 4G and 4G LTE. So if people in America are building apps that are 4G enabled, how do we use them in India? Because there are a bunch of global users who are very, very interested in the way apps are being done, and useful apps will always be used, like Airbnb or many others. So does your app work on 2G, 3G, 4G, Wi-Fi? What if you are 50 meters away from the Wi-Fi router, just outside the building? Does your Wi-Fi work? Is that a good thing? I had been to US recently, where most of these parks have Wi-Fi enabled places. Now, how good is that Wi-Fi? How safe is it? These are some of the elements that will come as part of your network testing. A little bit around guidelines. Again, something that mobile app testers ignore a lot is guidelines-based testing. Android has HIG design guidelines given for developers. It's iOS. Android has design guidelines. And then we have in-app purchase guidelines as well as store review guidelines again in iOS. So we upfront assume that people who are developing apps for these platforms already are aware of these guidelines and are implemented in your app. And when you actually get into the app, especially Android apps, because it's open source, everybody is and anybody is just doing what they like. So how do you actually test for these guidelines? Are these guidelines really very important to be tested? Now, as a tester, why should I test it? It was a developer who had to take care of those guidelines, right? So it's not my responsibility after all. So why do I do it? You can just say that and move on in life. Or you have an opportunity to look at those guidelines, understand them, study them and say, hey, you know what? Here are the 15 guidelines which your app doesn't subscribe to. And maybe, you never know, the App Store will just decline to upload your app on App Store. So that's where another element of guidelines-based testing comes into play. Communication. Let's say you're playing Angry Birds, you get some notifications from Twitter, configured. How do you feel? Does that block your UI? Does that stop the performance of the app? How does it affect the network connection or the data usage? And what happens if you get an incoming message? Is the notification shown or not? If it's shown, for how long? And what part of the visible screen or visible area is hidden because of that notification? So these are the communication mechanisms. So the basic functionality of the phone is still going to be messaging and phone calls. So if you're playing a game and if you're getting interruptions in the form of messages or phone calls, how is the app behaving? So when you get a call, for example, the app goes into the background and you're on the call. And when the call ends, where should you go back? Should you just go from scratch and start the app, or is the app still there and then comes to the foreground? This is part of the communication aspect. Updates and upgrades. If it's data heavy update, for example, there is an app which has a lot of data. For example, let's say Reverie phone book is a language technology app. If I do some updates for iOS, what happens to the contacts that are stored in that phone book? Does it have an impact? Will it corrupt my database? I don't know. So updates and upgrades can happen at two levels. One level is at an app level. The second level is at a platform level itself. How does platform level updates affect the app? How does app level updates or upgrades affect the app as well as the platform itself? Because sometimes you may have seen that if you install a particular app, the performance of the phone itself goes down because of battery usage or memory leakage or any other reasons. So it's very important to test for the updates and upgrades. Some apps like Flipkart give you an option saying, hey, there's a new update, go ahead and update. Some just don't tell you, they just automatically go and update and you don't know what has screwed up unless you go into your history and see it. And in some apps, they don't even provide the history. Very, very important aspect of apps like GoIbibo or Flipkart or Myntra, which extensively is used by the user base, especially the consumer user base. Then comes the functions. Functions is something that I believe we already do, so I'm not going to cover that in detail. Platforms, there are 3 to 5 platforms, and in China we have a few more platforms added. And in each of these platforms we have millions of devices. And we have to test, especially if it's a mass market app, we have to test on a variety of devices, on a large number of devices. So how do you choose them? So platform testing becomes very key. If there are some companies, for example, Facebook initially didn't go for a native app. They went for a hybrid app which was not doing well on some platforms. So they had to go back and recreate native apps for Facebook. So where are these decisions coming from? It's because of the lack of portability of the apps on different platforms. So it's up to the organizations to come up with whether they want to devise different apps for different platforms or the same one. There will be pros and cons on either sides. So that part becomes very, very important to test from platform coverage perspective. User scenarios. There are different kinds of users. Yesterday we got a requirement for testing where they needed testers in the age group of 55 to 65 for testing a simple insurance website in Australia. Now, to get that age group, imagine thinking about the different kinds of users in that age group. Do you just test? So what do? You would just pick that website, test for some insurance business logic, flows, and functionality, UI, blah, 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 and we are done, right? But think about the user age group, 55 to 65. Some of these are partially blind. Some of these have weakened senses. Some of the people in this age group may not like flashy stuff. They want things to be simple. Buttons may have to be a little larger. The color of the buttons or the layout of the website has to be much more simpler and easier for them to access. Most of these people might have color blindness. Color blindness itself has 3 types. And which of these color blindness to accommodate? What is the accessibility level, right? So when you think of, reflect on that particular age group, the way you test completely changes. The scenarios you look for completely changes. The same way, if you actually give the same website or an app to a 3-year-old, the way they do it is just so different. They'll just slide, do a few things, and then in a few minutes, the phone is on the ground because they've lost their patience, right? They're probably the best candidates for performance and stress testing of mobile apps. So to summarize, if you see, there's a mnemonic called long fun cup. I hope you can see it. Yeah. L stands for location, O for orientation, N for notifications, G for guidelines and gestures, F for functions, U for user scenarios, N again for networks, C for communication, U for updates and upgrades, and P for platform. So long fun cup is an easy way to remember. Whenever next time you test for test a mobile app, remember this mnemonic. If you Google it, you also have a blog post written by Dhanashekar, which is freely available for you to use. Coming up with scenarios based on these elements will help you test mobile apps better from a UI perspective, from a usability perspective, and from a consumer perspective in general. The next one is platform coverage. So we have multiple platforms, we have n number of browsers, and we have millions of devices. So how do we test? So how does Flipkart test? So many users, they've got so much of funding recently, they have millions of users across the globe, a lot of people outside India who want to place orders on Flipkart to their locations, not to India. So how do we manage? Which browser to choose? Should we just download the latest browsers and just test on them and it should be fine? Are we sure? What is the risk of not testing on older browsers? As I speak, 56% of the desktop population is still on Windows XP, SP3. How do you push updates to them? How do you encourage them to buy a Mac? Very hard. Consumers are not going to change. So how do you manage with compatibility and portability aspects of it? Android in itself is an ocean of fragmentation, millions of devices, millions of people coming up with several apps. How many Android devices can you test on? Where do you stop actually? Very, very hard for people who are building users-facing apps. So how to select from an ocean of devices? There are 4 basic approaches that I usually use based on my experience in the last 4 years. This is also something that Jonathan Cole emphasizes on. One is the singular approach. There are companies which say, I'm just going to build it for this particular model of this device, blindly, horse with blinkers. And I'm going to test it just on that. So any other complaints that come on this device, I don't care. If you go to Anjapur, Bangalore, that fellow uses a touchscreen app to take orders from the people who visit. And that particular product supports only on that model of the device. It works for them. So why not? The second one is the proportional approach. There are 3-4 platforms, there are 5-6 versions of the app itself, and then there are hundreds of devices. How do I choose? So this can be done in 2 ways. One way is to have a distribution of what percentage of support you want to give to Android or what percentage of support you want to give to iOS. For example, if I'm building an app for both the platforms, I can say my focus is more on Android, 70% focuses on Android and 30% focuses on iOS. In that way, you're clearly telling 70% of the devices that you'll be targeting for testing has to come from Android, and the remaining can come from iOS and a few other platforms, maybe perhaps on Windows, on some Samsung checks. So this will be multiple devices. And the second approach is to use analytics data. If the app has been in the market for a while, then look at the analytics. Look at what the analytics is saying. It might already say, you know what, 80% of users are all on Chrome, 10% on IE, and remaining 10% on Firefox. That is data for you. Use that data. Put more effort into the testing by bringing that data back into your testing planning and say, most of my testing is going to be focused on 80% of those users who are using Chrome. Similarly, the app platforms, 56% of my users are on Android, and the remaining is scattered, let's say. And if I'm very keen about maintaining those 56% of Android users, I'll put more energies on that. Of course, if that 56% grows to 90%, that becomes a different ballgame altogether. There will be more and more effort and emphasis on the Android app. So this is how the big data, whatever data you call it these days, is useful in bringing that data. Big data in itself is not powerful. Use that data to better yourself, and then it becomes powerful. There's another one called shotgun approach. Classic example is Flipkart or your GoIbibo apps or Snapdeal, Myntra, and so on, where there are millions of users, millions of devices, hundreds of platforms, and tons of browsers. We still have to test on desktop and Mac and others, right? Because no matter how mobile we go, we are coming back to the computers for some work or the other. So we have to still make it compatible, backward compatible. So what is that shotgun approach? You have to have the two categories that I mentioned. One is a manual check, where you say that I'm going to focus on this user set. That's one strategy. Second one is use the analytics data. There's a third one called problem child devices. So these are devices or mobile phones from specific manufacturers you clearly know are problem children, right? So historically, when you start testing over a period of time, let's say on multiple browsers or multiple apps, you will notice that this browser always has a problem. IE is a classic example, right? If you're testing web-based products on your mobile phones, you'll see that the majority of problems come in IE compared to Chrome and Firefox. Here is what happened. Here is where you can actually say that, okay, the screen is gone, the network has gone. Okay, so here is where you can say, this is a shotgun approach on how I want to address my stuff. Now, again, here is 100 devices a good bet, or is 200 devices a good bet? Again, there are multiple device models being released every day into the market. So do you choose the latest devices? Do you choose the older devices? This is where the challenge comes. While shotgun approach is highly beneficial in the way it works, it also poses a challenge of how many devices should a mobile testing company have in its warehouse or lab to be able to cater to testing. And let's say, I'm a rich company and I can afford 500 devices. Do you hire 500 testers? So, or do you just say, I'll hire 50 testers who will test for the next 2 years to release this app? So here are some of the challenging questions that arise while testing for mobile apps. I think I can cover the slide anyway because it's you've seen it already. The last one is outsourced approach, a very classic approach and an approach that has worked extensively very well in my experience. It will combine all the previous three approaches in itself and bring out the best. So in outsourced approach, you can have a small mobile device lab with a dedicated mobile testing team who will test the mobile apps. You can also have a mobile cloud platform which will rent you devices. You have heard of Perfecto Mobile. You may have heard of Device Anywhere, any of you? So these are companies who have connected their mobile devices to the networks. And using a web-based URL, you will be able to access the devices from the comforts of your desk. And when that happens, you'll be able to test everything on the mobile devices, except for testing for networks, gestures, and the feel of having a mobile phone in your hand. You will be testing it on a browser-based interface. So that is a second approach, second sub-approach within the outsourced approach. The third one is to outsource it directly to a company which has a lot of physical devices, right? That's anyway been there for a long time. The fourth one, and one of the most useful ones in my experience, is to send it to a cloud testing company. Like UTest, like PassBrains. PassBrains is also one of the sub-companies of my current employer called Pass. So this crowd testing companies, what they do is there are testers and users who are part of their community in different parts of the world. For example, our own community is 30,000 people strong, out of which 5,000 are users and 25,000 are professional testers. So out of this chunk, you can just say, hey, here is an app I need to test, and I need to see what is the real input from real users. Okay, I can't employ 500 testers, right? But can I employ 500 users? I can in some way. So I would just go ahead and hire those 500 testers from the crowd testing forum, and then give them the app, ask them to do a few tests, whatever you like, depending on whether it has to be testing driven or user driven. That is something that you can, a goal that you can chase, and then make them test the app. So in crowd testing, one of the biggest benefits is the fact that these are real users who are the end consumers, the consumers to whom you are targeting. For example, let's say I want to test a cable connection called Movistar in Argentina. Do I send my team to Chile right away, or Argentina for that matter? Not possible. Can I hire 5 testers from Argentina or 5 users of Movistar cable connection from Argentina to do it? Can be done in half a day, less than half a day. Okay, that's the power of crowd testing approach. So what approach suits for your mobile testing team is something that you will have to decide based on your several factors, like the size of the product, the kind of market you are looking at, the kind of infrastructure you may have personally, whether you can really buy that next mobile device, or should you outsource it to somebody who has it, or even rent a cloud platform which will give you the devices access on your desktops. Any questions so far?
Contest or something.
No?
Yeah, there's some quiz
Am I
contest.
fast?
This is Gautam from ThoughtWorks. He's my college
Okay,
friend
let's
also.
move on to mobile personas. I think we touched upon it when I talked about the 55 to 65-year-old age group. So every person carries a persona. Every user carries a persona. So I call mobile
This is the
users,
marketing guy.
user profiles as mobile personas. They can be mobile personas. Some people call it user profiles. Some people just call them simple users. So this is a profile of a user that we are looking for. This is for a real estate website that we did. So I had to test a real estate website a while ago, where we invited about 50 users to our office. Of course, we had to bribe them with food vouchers and asked them to answer a questionnaire while we video recorded them and also captured their answers on an Excel sheet on different aspects of the product. Now, how did we go about choosing those 50 users? I can't just pick anybody on the street and invite them, right? We have to have the right kind of target audience. If I am 60-year-old and I'm not even using Facebook, if you come and ask me what is your opinion about Facebook, you will say I just don't care, right? You just don't care. Or maybe if you're a parent of a kid who's always on Facebook, you will probably hate it all the time, right? So this is a mobile persona of a user who's using a real estate website. So the highlight, it's a male graduate aged between 25, 30 in a place called Bangalore, salaried, private. If you see, the terms salaried and private are highlighted. The reason is, depending on that, you will try to see the spending pattern or the budget range and so on. There, I used to work for Tesco a while ago. Their RTS system, also known as real-time sales system, has user history of about 25 plus years. That means if I had become their member in, let's say, 1985, they have my shopping history and my spending pattern in that time. So they capture that information over a period of time, and at any point in time, if you say, hey, give me the top 100 shoppers on Tesco, it will give you that list. Use that list, keep sending promotions to them, send them offers, send them discounts, coupons, or some gifts, occasional free gifts. And then they're going to come back again and again and again, right? You're just attracting the consumers. So their salary levels, that is why when you go to this Garuda mall or many other malls, if you mention the salary range, be sure to get a lot of calls, because there are some agencies which are going to target you on that. Your bank information, by the way, all of your personal bank information is always sold to a lot of people, which is why you get calls, despite getting into the do not call registry, right?
Okay.
So this is an example of a user persona. And this user is one of the users who we are targeting. And for such users, what is it that this is interesting? Let's go back to the insurance website that I talked about. For 55 to 65, here is how a website should look or should work. If I have to cater the same website to a 25-year-old person and sell insurance, he'll say, "Arey yaar, I don't think I'm going to die tomorrow."
At the same time.
How do you motivate them to do that? The approach has to be a little different. So do you come up with 10, 15 websites? No. You have to have the best bet, and that is mostly driven by the organizational strategy. There are a few more user categories: easy tech savvy or novice, trespasser, first time user. No matter how novice you are these days, many people are doing business on WhatsApp, a very, very revolutionary thing. More than Facebook, it's WhatsApp which is being used. First time users, users of competitor apps. For one of the real estate website user survey that we did, we got 2-3 competitors of this real estate website, so that we know what the competitors are saying. So there was a, let's say the website that we tested was A, and there was a competitor B who was better than A. We knew B was better than A. We got the users of B to test A and tell us what they felt about A. This way we were also able to channelize on the strong points of how B worked and bring in those changes into A. How can we attract users of B to move to A, right? So in 2003 I was working at Oracle. Oracle was one of the large players in CRM at that time. But there were a lot of competitors coming up. There was PeopleSoft, there was SAP anyway, which was ruling the roost, and then there was BA Systems and Siebel. So Oracle for almost 2 years tried very hard up until 2005 to see that they can become the number one in market. For some crazy reason, Larry always wanted to be number one, and so he wanted to drive the company that way, especially the CRM division. What happened is, it was very hard to cope with all the good aspects that Siebel had or PeopleSoft had. Instead of taking another 5-6 years to develop those products, Larry just bought the companies. He bought PeopleSoft, and then he started building something called Fusion applications. If some of you are in Oracle today, and if you hear the word Fusion, it's because the best of Oracle technologies and the best of PeopleSoft features were clubbed into a single release, and what you see in Oracle CRM today is that Fusion product. So the funda is always be aware of your competitors, users of competitors, and see what is it that they are liking in your competitor. Very, very important thing. Again, the question comes back. I am a tester. Why should I do competitor analysis? The concept is not about whether you are being a tester or what role you are playing. The concept and the idea is, are you contributing in a vision that is larger than yourself in terms of building a great product. If you just channelize yourself as, I am the tester and I'll do only this, then you're surrounded by an ecosystem. You're doing this for the entire ecosystem, and if you're not catering to the ecosystem, you're just going to drop down someday. Another user profile based on analytics. So we collected a lot of analytics data because this app was already in the market, and we said, here is the profile. So this was a key information for us to come up with what kind of users we wanted to interview.
First you finish on the site thing.
The next one is guidelines. I'm going to cut this short. We covered it a while ago, where we talk about different types of guidelines, how we can test them. Now these guidelines are several pages long, 40-50 pages. So do you actually go and read those guidelines, then test for each of those guidelines? Again, it's a developer's job. No. You can read the guidelines, study the guidelines once, have only a list of short cheat sheet or checklist, which is already available on Google for free. Check that checklist, validate them against the product. 5 to 15 steps, you'll be done with testing for all important guidelines at least. Especially for people who are on IAS, it's very, very important to align themselves with the guidelines so that they are in sync when they are ready to submit the app. So one of the apps that we tested, we had to thoroughly test it for guidelines. We had done one complete functional testing and API testing cycle for the mobile app. This was a smart voicemail application on mobile phones. For this, although we had done all that, when we went to the iOS HIG guidelines testing, we realized that 50% of the guidelines mentioned in HIG were not being aligned to by the app, which would have become a big jolt for them when they went to the app store to submit, because app store is very, very critical about the kind of apps that are submitted on their store. We also have store submission guidelines and even app in purchase guidelines of how these works.
Changing a
I
few
was
words
also at this Google conference recently where even Android has whole lot of these guidelines to make your apps much better. You can always get into developer.android.com and look for those guidelines.
Excuse me.
Competitor analysis. So what do we do when it's a competitor? Get a competitive user to test and it's done. Right? There are several levels in which you can do competitor analysis again. One is platform level comparison. What is the kind of technology it is built on? What is the language used? If it's on ASP, then I know that I can exploit view state variable and screw up a lot of things on the product. If it's on something else, how does it matter? A majority of mobile apps are built using the web technology mindset. Right? If you open the app, you will think that it's a website on phone, and or maybe even worse. So that is a different usability, gives a different usability feeling compared to actual better mobile apps. So platform level comparison is very important, and also to outline how it can become better or it is worse compared to others in the market. Feature level comparison is something that's very obvious and most of us do anyway. Quality criteria level comparison. What is quality criteria? Whatever you call as functional, security, performance, and capability, compatibility, reliability, all of these come into something called quality criteria. If you're interested to know more, let me know, I'll drop you a link. There are 36 quality criteria that you can actually test for. It's called Kruspik Stample by a guy called James Park, who has done extensive work in the quality criteria space. So you can compare apps with respect to functionality, you can compare apps with respect to compatibility, you can do it versus reliability, how reliable is one mobile payment gateway, PayZP, let's say, versus Citrus. Those kind of comparisons can be done. What is the social media saying? What is social media saying after Flipkart's big billion day sale? Versus what is social media saying about Snapdeal on the same day, right? This matters a lot in terms of gaining or losing customers, and since these are consumer facing, there's a lot of loss to be faced. Flipkart is going to take a while to get many of those customers. In fact, on that day when the big billion day sale happened, many of them moved to Snapdeal and Amazon. Some of these were highly loyal customers of Flipkart, many of them, and to get them back is going to be a gigantic task. So always listen to social media. Social media also becomes beneficial when you tag on Twitter and say, Flipkart, you suck. Okay, what does the customer support do? Do you block them, or do you get in touch with them and say, hey, can you tell me what's the problem you faced? Let me fix it. Okay, how you handle customer support on social media? How do you respond? Do you just ignore? Do you follow up? Several of BSNL complaints, if you write to them, you send a regular mail, ordinary mail, doesn't work. You just tag them on Twitter and send it. It gets sorted within half a day or one day. Why? Because they are emphasizing on getting close to the customers. So listen to what the social media is telling about your apps. If your app is already not yet in the market, then think about how similar apps are faring in the market. No matter, I believe that no matter how much we may call ourselves as differentiators, we still have some common things which still exist in the world. So Evan Williams, one of the founders of Twitter, always said, so there were these 4 co-founders who were having a conversation when one of the guys called Jack said, you know what, I invented Twitter. Evan Williams told back, no, you didn't. Internet was always there, right? That idea was always there. You just picked one idea and built on that idea and made it big. So the knowledge has always been there. It depends on you on how you pick up that idea and then make it big. So the point is, use social media to listen to people, irrespective of whether you're being a differentiator in a different space or not. I love the way Tanishq handles customer support. I also like the way BSNL handles customer support. But this may not be consistent, right? When you go back or you have a similar experience with them, if it doesn't happen, you'll say, somebody said this was good. Because it's you, sir. Okay? Just field testing, apply your agile philosophy to it. The way you do it is completely different from doing it the way the document tells you to do. Okay? So for me, it's about giving the concept, and how you apply that concept is up to you. If you are on a waterfall model, go ahead and use it in a waterfall model. See where it fits. I have been on V model. I know where it fits. And for Agile, it's the same. So when it comes to mobile apps testing or any testing for that matter, don't build boxes telling this is waterfall, this is Agile, this is something else. Fit it to your context. What is Agile? Take the best that is coming to you and fit it to a context where it works best for you and bring out the best from it. Bring out the best from the situation, from yourself, and from the work that you're doing. Rather than that, what is happening today is we want everything to be in Agile, the buzzword. Big data is a buzzword. Now, Internet of Things. It's bullshit, honestly. Internet of Things existed 25 years ago. I heard of the first internet networked home 15 years ago near my house, in my area. And you're bringing that back as a brand new thing. Anarkali salwars, it was there 25 years ago in old Hindi movies. Today it's a sensation. Everybody, is wearing anarkalis as if it's the next big thing. Bring the mindset into it. Don't just get hooked on to, is this Agile? I will do it only if it's Agile. No. Bring the mindset. It's a mindset, it's a philosophy, so apply it. So it's the same thing here. I intentionally have not used too many words of Agile here. Okay? Yes, sure. I'm here for the whole day. So, fine. So, coming back to field testing, how are the apps used? User surveys can help. It can be email questionnaires, phone questionnaires, face-to-face questionnaires, or however you like it. What do users say? Reviews, online reviews and ratings. Again, online reviews are so screwed because they'll only post, most of the times they'll post only positive feedback, negative feedback they won't. A few years ago, there was a company I worked for. Whenever the customer completed the complete positive flow, they would be faced with a survey page. If they failed somewhere, they would never show the survey page because they knew they would get negative feedback. What's the point of having surveys if you don't want to listen to the feedback? The real estate website that I told, I did a 40-page users survey analysis and sent it to them, where I had a 6-hour meeting with them, telling them, here are the negative things about your product. They never called me back because they were so emotional about the product and not really emotional about fixing the problems in the product. Integration with context, very, very important. Integration testing. What else? Social? Searching in messages. Okay. Third-party emoticons.
Does it allow multiple user profiles?
User profiles. Share option, where you can share from mail, Facebook, Twitter, blah, blah, blah. What else? Chat history. History, okay. Security.
What does it do if you have one version? If you use the same phone number and try and install 2 versions of WhatsApp?
How different is it? Fantastic, fantastic. So,
Unshared actually.
Okay.
Keep it in the shared mode.
I don't know how to do that, but I think I'll wind up for that. Okay. So if you notice, majority of what you said was around features and functionality. A few others was around quality criteria like security, performance, functionality, installability, downloadability. And some of you spoke about speed, which was more on the network side, right? And all of you are users anyway, so you encompass field testing anyway, right? So now put back those elements into the slide. Put back those ideas around how it comes here. So where would you put, what would you put in fields testing, what would you put in mobile personas, competitor analysis. We didn't talk about competitors, by the way. WhatsApp, who are the competitors? It could be, right? A whole lot of new hike, many others. So how does that happen? Now, all of your ideas that you listed, if you had actually noted it down on a notepad, then put it into each of these buckets, and then think about writing test scenarios for your testing. It will be much, much effective and guided and structured in the way you do things. That is the reason also why one person testing a mobile app versus this entire room testing the same mobile app makes a difference. There is a model called elliptical model by James Park where everybody brings some strengths and weaknesses to the table. The idea is all about combining the strengths, magnifying the strengths while we minimize on the weaknesses. So the idea of this session was to introduce you to some of these concepts and get you to start thinking in that direction, and then you can make more buckets. This is my bucket list. You can make more buckets, fit into buckets, and then start writing scenarios. If your testers start writing scenarios, if your test leads or managers create more and more buckets so that testers can think about it. It's about conditioning. When I think about field testing, I'm conditioning my mind to some scenarios which I may not have thought of in other bucket. So that's how this mobile strategy helps. Any questions? Time out, but
Yeah, one moment. I'll just provide the mic.
Can you tell us a bit more about the crowdsourcing?
okay, crowd testing is a concept where you engage the crowd, the general janta, to test. For example, if you have watched KBC, there is an audience poll, right? Most of the cases, if you have seen audience poll, most of the answers are right, more than 60 to 70% of the time. That's because we believe that crowd has certain amount of knowledge that may not be available with the people that we may have. New perspective, the way they use products, and maybe their own general knowledge is a little higher than the people that we have on board in our teams. So we want to engage the crowd in some way. So how do we engage? We can do events or hackathons or bug bashes or conferences like this where we invite the crowd and ask them to test something. Or we have a community we can manage over a period of time, like TechCrunch has a community, or Tech Hub has a community, or some general gatherings. You build this community over a period of time. We have a platform or a website where all this community is logged in. And whenever you need to test something, let's say in Argentina for a new cable connection, you just send a mass mailer to all of these users telling, hey, if you're in Argentina and you have this product, then why don't you test it for us? In return, we give them money. We pay them per bugs. On a per bug model, we pay them. Some users, we also engage them on a per survey basis. We tell them, come over for the service, we'll give you food vouchers or we'll give you some money. Why don't you answer it for us?
Thank you.
I'm here for the rest of the day. If you have other questions, I think we are running out of time for the next session. Thank you so much.
Many thanks, Parimala. Well, we'll be felicitating you, and for which I would like to call upon Masa.
Thank you so much, Masa.
Looking forward to more of your contribution. I think the certificate, could face the audience as well.
Oh, okay. You want to hold it back again like traditional
back.
Indian photographs?
Yeah, that-
You hold it like
Yeah,
this,
like this. Life is a blank of
Right.
paper. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you so much. Thank you.